On this episode, we talk with the BMW Vice President of Vehicle Safety about their latest innovations to keep pedestrians safe. Then, we look at public health partnerships and walking in Worcester, Massachusetts. Finally, we visit Fairfield, Connecticut, where a public workshop brings in ideas to make the city more walkable and bikeable. Stay tuned.
We're just outside Washington, D.C. at the Enhanced Safety of Vehicles Conference, talking with Klaus Compass, who's the Vice President for Vehicle Safety for BMW. So, what do you do in your position?
Well, I'm responsible for the entire development of vehicle safety, from active safety to passive safety to also post-crash protection systems.
And you have something called BMW Integrated Safety. What's that?
Well, actually, we at BMW, we understand vehicle safety in a broader manner. In the past, everybody has concentrated on passive safety mainly. That means the crash has taken place. Now, how can we protect the occupants as good as possible? We are going on a broader approach. We already start thinking about the safety of the occupants in the car while normal driving. We work on driver assistance systems. We provide driver assistance systems to inform the driver, give him the best information for him to perform in his driving task the best way. Then, of course, if it comes to critical situations, we alert the driver, we warn the driver, give him the information again. Maybe also even autonomously do some reactions in the vehicle. And though it comes to a crash, we do all the measurements of passive safety with airbags, with seat belts, with crash crumble zones and things like that. And even if the crash has occurred, we are not stopping our efforts. We are working and we provide e-call systems that alert the emergency rescue personnel about the accident, about where the accident has taken place. And also we are using information from within the vehicle to predict the severity of injuries for the occupants, for the emergency rescue personnel to be informed as good as possible, to even get people into the trauma center as quickly as possible and save even more lives.
And the vehicle behind us, we've got a little child dummy here. What are you demonstrating here?
Well, this demonstration shows, number one, the rear view camera, which is in our cars since quite a long time and is also available in other cars. But in this case, it's not the rear view camera alone. We combine the rear view camera with the ultrasonic park distance control sensors. Plus, we also have cameras in the outside mirrors to also show the driver a view of the side of the car. And we have a second dummy next to the passenger door. And this dummy normally can't be seen neither by the rear view camera nor by the mirrors, but the side view camera can also show this person or this obstacle there to the driver. The driver then gets something like a top view vision system around his car. It's like a bird's view if you look down from the top to the car and you see what's around the car.
And you're demonstrating an experimental vehicle out there, braking for a car that's sitting in the middle of the road, braking for a pedestrian in the road. What's that system?
Well, actually, the system that I just described is already in place today. You can get it, you can buy it. We have the system in serious production. Another system already in serious production is the night vision system, night vision with object detection, where also a pedestrian walking next to the street is identified and the warning is sent out to the driver. This is already existing technology today. The next generation that is what we are showcasing here, is a preventive pedestrian protection system. We have a camera integrated into the windshield, and this camera can identify objects in front of the car, in front of my own car, realize what kind of object that is, how this object is moving, and whether there is a potential risk of a collision with this object or with this subject. It can be a person, of course, as well. And then the car sends out a warning to the driver. If the driver reacts and applies the brake, that's the desired scenario. then the brake is prepared, it is pre-filled, so the brake is already has built up a certain amount of pressure. So when the driver hits the brake pedal, he can instantly reduce the speed. If the driver does not react at all, at the very, very last moment, the car automatically applies the brake and avoids the collision, or at least mitigates the severity of the collision.
Now, what sort of research has gone into getting as far as you are now with this new system?
Well, this new system, we still have to work on the reliability of the sensor system, of course. We still have to find the right balance between there might occur false alarms, but they must not be annoying to the driver. If they appear too frequently, then the driver will not react in a real alarm. So we have to find the right balance. If it is a critical situation, the driver identifies that it was a critical situation without really the pedestrian being in the collision area in front of the car. But if this will most probably be acceptable for the driver, but it must not be annoying, because otherwise he won't react when it's really necessary. To find that right balance between effective alerting and activation of the system and the least possible number of false alarms. This is still the next work we have to do, and make the systems more reliable, run clinic studies, run driver studies on the driver simulator as well as in real traffic to identify what is acceptable for the driver. This is still the ongoing work before we can definitely launch the system in a very few number of years from now.
When you're looking at something like pedestrians, what are the challenges to identify what is a pedestrian, and then identify whether that pedestrian represents a hazard or a potential crash?
The biggest threat, the biggest difficulty is that the pedestrian has a very high dynamic. I mean, everybody thinks about going fast means high dynamic, but a car that goes fast doesn't have that high dynamic in the lateral way. A pedestrian can walk one way and can instantly change his direction. So the dynamic of changing direction, of changing the path for a pedestrian is very high. And this is really a difficult thing for the detection system, for the sensor, to identify, is this a pedestrian who is just walking in parallel to the driveway, or is this pedestrian about to cross the street? That's the biggest challenge.
We're in Worcester, Massachusetts, talking with Karen Valentine Goins, who's a public health professional. What do public health professionals think about when they think about walking?
Well, they're thinking more about it lately. Most people are aware that there's a big problem, growing rates of chronic disease, increasing rates of overweight and obesity that are going to lead to even more chronic disease. And public health is realizing that they have to actually look at changing the context in which people make decisions, the healthy choice to walk or to bicycle, or what types of food they choose. A lot of that is dictated by context.
And who is creating the context for what this all takes place in?
Well, there are a lot of, the context in which people make decisions about walking is dictated by forces that are, in most cases, certainly beyond the healthcare community. There's a lot of transportation and land use decision making that people may or may not be aware really influences what choices they get to make.
So, how would the public health profession influence what's going on in terms of transportation decisions, planning decisions? Does the planning board come looking for public health people to consult?
No, and that's a good way of putting it, that a lot of the decision-making that goes on that affects the built environment, transportation and land use, they have a lot of processes that are in place for that decision-making, and that in many cases they're public processes, but that people are going to have to come to that table. At the federal level, there's been a lot of partnership building between public health and, for instance, the transportation community. What we have to do is bring that down to the local level.
So what does that mean you have to do here in Worcester?
Well, we're working on that. As I said, there's a lot of partnership and a lot of recommendations on what communities should look like, places where people could actually safely, comfortably, and pleasurably walk or bicycle. But that those recommendations, you have to translate them all the way down to the local level. Here in Massachusetts, the State Department of Public Health began something called Mass in Motion, an initiative specifically to address overweight and obesity, but not through simply promoting healthy choices, but also through bringing together partners that haven't always worked together, health and non-health partners, public and private, to help decide or to figure out what changes need to be made specifically or in a specific community.
You take these different partners that have never worked together before. How much does it? What does it take to get them to work together effectively when they just have never done it before?
A lot of relationship building is really the basis. Partnership development is a big basis of the Mass in Motion initiative, and that really takes time. We're not going to see immediate changes, policy change, public policy change. Again, it's part of a big process. It's going to take a lot of time to get there. First, the players have to get to know each other, develop a common language, develop strategies about what people in that community want to focus on, and then get people involved in each other's decision making. And my perspective tends to be to bring along people interested in health promotion into those, again, the decisions that are already being made about the built environment.
You mentioned the statewide program. What do you have going on at the local level here?
We also, in Worcester, are fostering a group that we've had a food policy council for several years that was initiated by the then mayor, now Lieutenant Governor of Massachusetts, which we've expanded to include active living. And that will be really the hub of advocacy efforts because it's going to take, in addition to partnership, actual advocacy to prioritize changes that will let people be active as a part of regular life.
And you have infrastructure changes that sidewalks and then the built environment. What do you need to be beyond just physical infrastructure to get people to be more active?
Well, and that's a particularly relevant question in a place like our city, which is has economic constraints. But there are a lot of policy changes that can underlie that can come before major infrastructure changes. Sometimes when people see me, they automatically get dollar signs about sidewalks or bicycle lanes. But what I'm talking about is changing, for instance, the way when a project is reviewed in the project review process are questions being asked about what kind of connections there will be to schools, to parks, to libraries, to grocery stores. So changing the regulations or the practices that lead to how a particular project looks when it's done.
How will we measure success? If this works, what are we going to see that may be different without it?
That's an excellent question, and it is something that we get a lot. And in fact, there aren't good metrics yet for measuring for the benchmarks for this work. People can see where we are. They could even see, let's say, some of the inputs, but they kind of want to jump right to a policy change or right to a major infrastructure investment, where there's going to be advocacy. Logic models tend to give us good benchmarks, but we really need to develop some markers of, when will we know when we're moving along? How will we know we're moving along? In creating communities, changing the way land is used or transportation decisions are made that will actually get us to more walkable environments.
We're in Fairfield, Connecticut, talking with Brian Bedoli, who's Executive Director of the Greater Bridgeport Regional Planning Agency. What is the planning agency?
Well, essentially, our agency is tasked with providing transportation planning support to our member regions. Our member towns encompass Bridgeport, Fairfield, Fairfield, Trumbull, Easton, and Monroe. We're the federally designated transportation planning agency, and we're kind of tasked with conducting most of the long-range planning initiatives throughout our region.
What brought you here to Fairfield tonight?
Well, Fairfield tonight, we've been invited at the direction of some work we've recently been doing with the Fairfield Bike Ped Advisory Committee. And through that work, which actually has also involved a very active citizen group that really went out there, is very proactive, and organized this event in conjunction with the study that we recently completed. And then through that study, we developed a set of kind of indicators of kind of what's going on in town in terms of bike and pedestrian facilities. And we wanted to come out and really solicit the public and see, what do you need and where do you want to bike and what kind of improvements are you looking for? And then at that point, we'll then take that information and develop target areas for analysis and ultimately come back with a set of recommendations for implementation.
Have you done this sort of thing with other jurisdictions in your area, or is this something sort of new?
No, we've actually we've been trying to be fairly proactive in integrating bike and ped into our overall planning program. I mean, we recently completed a charrette with the town of Trumbull, where we're looking at the regional impacts of our Housatonic Railroad Trail project. This project extends from Newtown Town Line all the way down to the Sound. In addition, we have done some work with Stratford in terms of their greenway development, and we're also working with the city of Bridgeport to do some sort of complete streets-oriented policies and plans.
And you've done a little work on public input prior to tonight's meeting. Plus, we had sort of the first preliminary reports from the various groups that were getting together here. What have you been hearing? What are people concerned about?
Well, I think people are concerned about how we can make it work. I mean, there's a lot of things that people are interested in having in their community, but they want to make sure that every mode is accommodated for. You know, you still have the need to drive, but you also want to make it safe for you to bike. You want to have you want to have your cake and eat it too, to a certain extent, you know. But there's ways that we could actually integrate solutions to make that happen. And I think people are just trying to understand that process and eventually figure out how it's going to work in their local neighborhood. And I mean, that's really the most important step, is to get the local perspective, almost hyper-local perspective, in terms of how it will work for them, how it will actually impact their day-to-day life. And then once we can ascertain that, we can then develop a set of solutions.
And even though we're talking about very local stuff, we do have state highways that run through the middle of town. How does that complicate things? Are we working with state DOTs then, as well as the local government? What's going on?
Yeah. Well, apart from our responsibilities at the regional level, it's we benefit from a relationship with the Department of Transportation. We interact with them on a frequent basis, and we're able to kind of guide the funding that we receive through them into improvements locally. But it is important, like you mentioned. I mean, but building that relationship and making sure that they're involved in any discussion will ultimately result in the most successful improvements.
Well, if I were to come back 10 years, even 20 years from now, what would success look like?
Yeah, well, success would look like, less accidents in terms of quantitatively, more bike facilities, but I think success would also look like bringing the public back to the drawing board and making sure that the improvements that we have made really fit their needs. And public engagement isn't just a one-step process where we get the feedback and then we just make our solutions and then we leave you alone. I mean, there needs to be continual feedback and civic engagement in this whole process, because just like the pedestrian network changes, the road network changes. So you got to be almost not necessarily in a constant state of flux, but you need to be able to be responsive to those kind of changes.
We're talking with Christine Sander with the Fairfield Bike Walk Coalition. What is the coalition?
It's a group of concerned citizens who came together to advocate that our town consider creating a pedestrian bicycle safety plan.
And what did you do once you got together? What was the next step?
Well, we first wanted to figure out what each of us was most concerned with, what our strengths were, what we could bring to the group, what we knew, and what we would like to see. And then from that, we narrowed down the 5 goals that we have for our organization, which is to improve sustainability, the environment, health, and different opportunities for transportation other than the car.
Okay, so once you identified these 5 areas you want to address, then what?
We went to the town first, and we asked them to help us create a plan. And because it's a very new thing in this part of New England, it's not something that all of the towns have started to do, even though we have our first town in Connecticut, Simsbury, that was awarded the first level by the League of American Bicyclists. So there are towns that are starting to do this. New Haven has done this a little bit, but the greater area hasn't really embraced this. So when we went to the town to begin with and asked for the funding for the regional bike plan, we were rejected. So we had to locate the funds for the initial plan from the Greater Bridgeport Regional Planning Association. Even though it sounds like a public organization, it is a private engineering firm. So we found the initial funding on our own to get the ball started, and then once we did that, and then we got the word out about our group, and more people contacted the town about how excited they were that this was even being talked about, that then from there we were allowed to form this advisory committee with the full embrace of our town's leadership.
So tell me a little more about the advisory committee.
The advisory committee composes all the components that we hope will help us avoid any kind of roadblocks or pitfalls. So we knew we needed zoning, because if we were going to put in a sidewalk, take away a sidewalk, do something, zoning would have to be able to approve that. Curbing, all of that falls within their jurisdiction. In our town, we have a culture and an attitude of people who travel 20, 30, 40 miles over the speed limit on all roads. So we knew we needed enforcement. We knew we needed to involve the police department, even though we have a really great police department, where we needed help in that area. And then we needed the traffic engineer, because if we were going to do any striping or signage, that would be their department. And then we knew we needed to keep the the mayor involved. So he's represented as well, because he drives the political mechanism behind this, and then our board itself is on the advisory committee. And with that, they've been able to really push this agenda forward, because everyone who is the head of everything in our town is sitting on a board once a month having a conversation about this. And that's really important, because it's not something they've talked about at one meeting and then we'll see you next spring. It's something they agreed to be on every month. And it's not too much, it's not like every week, but it's every month. And I think that's enough for everyone to clear their schedule for the 1 hour and 20 minutes I think they meet. And then our board meets after that meeting, and then we hash out anything that's come up or anything else. And then we can go look for our friends, our neighbors, if we want to have phone calls made, or if we want to push an issue, if we hear something, we hear resistance cropping up, helps us mobilize and then get back and push back as well.
So what was tonight's event?
It was our first opportunity to invite the general public, hoping to get people that maybe weren't interested before to fill out our survey because they weren't already biking and walking. To get our message out there, to invite the state Department of Transportation. I think we're getting some attention from the state because we're putting in this new train station that has had financial problems, and the state's had to sort of take over the finishing in our town. And through that, it's almost a blessing that we've needed, this involvement, because now we brought them here, and then we've been able to identify inherent problems with parking and development of that train station, and there's a limited amount of space, there's environmental issues. So how else do we get people to a train station if they don't drive their car? Well, you can't get, so it's really opened up the conversation of how to get to the Commerce Drive area, which has allowed us to have state interest, which, and otherwise I think maybe the state would be too busy doing other things, but they're highly right now financially invested in getting this third train station open on the Metro North line. That's been very important.
So what sort of ideas were people coming up with tonight? What did you discover about what's on people's minds?
I think it's the same thing that's on all of our minds, and we see, and it's a very, 59,000 is not a large community, but what I was noticing in my own group was that the recognition of the use of the streets from even within a car. Let's say a person who drove a car realizes that the cross-country tracks, cross-country teams at the university level as well as the high school level go out from their school destinations to run, and they run in packs, and if there is no sidewalks and there's no running ways, they're running on the roads, and they're running out in traffic, and they're running on unlevel ground, and their suggestion was taking open space and land around the university and creating running tracks as well as bicycle ways or pedestrian ways to segregate the different types of usage, which is even in a higher order thinking level than we had anticipated, and as well as maintaining what we already have. Planning and zoning has only required sidewalks to be part of a redevelopment issue for a certain period of time. And then there were other periods in our history, because we've been here a long time in Fairfield, since the 1600s. So there's other sidewalks that maybe were created 30 years ago, and then a new sidewalk section was put in by, it was mandated if the new medical building was put in, and then so you have an asphalt sidewalk with no edges connecting to a concrete sidewalk that's been root destroyed because we have a lot of trees, and so our sidewalks, even though in some cases in my neighborhood in the beach area we have a lot of them, they are in disrepair. So that was the thing that I was interested in seeing from a walking standpoint, because I feel our neighborhood's very walkable relative to the other neighborhoods in town. But our sidewalks and the width of our sidewalks are extremely narrow. So in most cases you can't walk side by side with a peer and talk while walking because the sidewalk isn't wide enough. One person has to walk in the soft shoulder, or the parking they call it, my grandmother used to call it, and then the person walking on the sidewalk. So that was another concern, is possibly making it so two people could walk side by side while walking.
So what's the next step? People go home tonight, they get up tomorrow, what happens next?
Well, hopefully, all of the surveys, it seems like almost everyone who sat down at our table filled out the survey, which was basically asking them if they don't walk, why don't they? What their concerns are. If they do, how much do they walk or not walk or ride their bike? And while they're out walking or while they're out riding their bike, what are they seeing that could be improved, that would make their experience better, or would get them to walk further? Like in some cases we walk in our neighborhood, but then you get to a major intersection as a bicyclist or a walker, and then crossing that major congested intersection is prohibitive. So it sort of limits where you go. So you kind of, use your own little habit trails and you stay in your own neighborhood, but you can't get to other people's neighborhoods or denser parts of town to do things like go to the post office or small grocery stores because by foot or by bike exclusively, because there's these barriers. That's what we're hoping to identify. And so when they finish up their regional plan, then they will be able to highlight those areas that are most popular, which will then receive the least local resistance when change happens, because in New England, change is a very tough subject. Another thing is on-street parking in the beach area. It's very hard to get people to identify that if they walk to the beach or ride their bike to the beach, they aren't going to need all that excessive on-street parking because they won't be driving their car there. So if you have to lose a parking space here or there to bump out a curb, it will be replaced by a higher volume of people walking and bicycling to the beach. So we won't be, short parking, and just being able to help make that switch. So hopefully from here, we'll take these surveys, they'll finish up their plan, we'll make another presentation to the town, and then hopefully there'll be funds waiting for us to put in signage and make the changes that we need to make to begin this process.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.